Viktor Vasilyevic was sitting at his old but still cozy writing desk on it. Papers were neatly arranged. A few books lay open, and a couple of his favorite mechanical pencils rested nearby in the corner. The aquarium gurgled quietly, its soothing blue light reflecting on the darkened walls. Everything was familiar, routine, just a calm evening in his quiet apartment. But this evening was about to change. There was a knock at the door. A young courier stood there with a bright red bag. "Here's a letter for you, Viktor Vasilyevic," he said cheerfully, handing over a thick envelope. "From whom?" Viktor asked, raising an eyebrow as usual. "From the traffic police," the courier replied curtly, then turned and hurried down the stairs, leaving Viktor standing at the door. Traffic police, Viktor thought, closing the door behind him. Strict speed limits. Huh. However, the fine seemed like a minor detail. Calmly, he opened the envelope, expecting boring numbers and bank details. But what he saw made his hands freeze. The photograph from the traffic camera showed his car. He instantly recognized it. The old but reliable sedan he cared for as meticulously as everything else in his life. However, the hand on the steering wheel was not his, it was his wife's hand. But that wasn't what shocked him the most. On the passenger seat sat a man unknown to Viktor, brazenly resting his hand on his wife's knee. Viktor instinctively sank down. His heart pounded like a hammer on an anvil. He couldn't take his eyes off the photo. It was something impossible. Nadezhda, his Nadezhda, she would never do that. She was a somewhat frivolous woman, yes, but he knew her for decades. They must be mistaken. It's not her, Viktor thought, but immediately dismissed the thought. It was impossible to be wrong when faced with such clear, merciless evidence. His mind began to race at full speed. Who was this man? Why were they in his car? And most importantly, why had she betrayed him? Viktor was a calm and rational economist, used to always looking for meaning in everything. How could she betray him like this? A few minutes later, he stood up and headed to the bathroom to wash his face. The cold water brought him back to reality. In his mind, a plan of action was slowly taking shape. First, he had to stay calm. He wouldn't let emotions take control. Viktor knew every decision had to be weighed carefully. He wasn't going to make a scene or break things out of despair. If she betrayed me, I'll find out the truth and then decide what to do, he thought. Later that evening, Viktor pulled a small flash drive from his desk drawer. He connected it to his computer, launched software to recover deleted files, and delved into his wife's phone history. He was confident he would find proof. And he did. Several messages and photos saved in the chat pointed to one thing. His wife had been seeing this man for several months. But the sharpest pain came when Viktor stumbled upon their photo together, taken at the very place they had always dreamed of visiting as a couple. It was a luxurious villa by the sea where he had planned to take Nadezhda for their anniversary. Stanislav, that was the man's name, stood next to his wife, smiling as if life belonged only to the two of them. Viktor tasted bitterness as the name lingered on his tongue. He rose from the desk and paced the room. The panic retreated, giving way to another feeling, cold calculation. He felt ready to act. First, he wrote down the lover's name and saved screenshots of all the photos. Then he considered his next moves. He had one goal, to punish them both. But it had to be done smartly, without fuss, without unnecessary words. Nadezhda deserved to know that he had discovered the truth, but not right away. And Stanislav would have a special conversation with him, Viktor thought, clenching his fists. He stopped in front of the mirror and looked at himself. The Viktor who had always been peaceful, calm, and patient was gone. In his place stood a man ready to take his fate into his own hands. "If you want to betray me, Nadia, be ready for the consequences," he said aloud, looking at his reflection. The next morning, he took out his best suit, carefully smoothed his hair, and went to see his friend Artyom. It was time to start preparations. Outside, the cold was biting. Despite the calendar saying spring was near, Viktor walked along the narrow sidewalks of his residential district, hands deep in his coat pockets. The cold wind tousled his hair, but his thoughts were hot as molten metal. He was still replaying the letter from the traffic police in his mind, the photo of Nadezhda sitting next to Stanislav, His wife's face, her smile, so familiar and yet so strange, felt like a knife that kept cutting him from the inside. But Victor didn't allow himself any weakness. He was about to meet Artyom, his old friend and the owner of a small but cozy motel on the edge of town. Artyom was a man who knew how to keep secrets. And right now, Victor needed exactly that kind of man, honest, decisive, and most importantly, not inclined to ask unnecessary questions. Entering the motel with his usual bright eyes that always betrayed his kind nature, Victor exclaimed cheerfully as he approached the front desk, "Well, look who it is. What brings you here so early?" Victor didn't answer. Immediately, he sat down at one of the wooden tables in the corner of the lobby, gesturing for his friend to join him. "I have a problem," he began. Artyom sat down opposite him, folding his hands on the table, and said seriously, "Tell me, quickly." Victor told the whole story. The letter from the traffic police, the photograph, the evidence he found on his wife's phone. He didn't hide his pain, but spoke coldly, as if describing a business project. When he finished, Artyom let out a heavy sigh. "Hard to believe," he said. "Nadezhda, she always seemed so proper. That's what kills me," Victor replied. "I want justice to prevail, but I'm not going to stoop to her level." "So what are you planning?" Artyom asked cautiously, narrowing his eyes. Victor leaned closer, his voice quiet but determined. "First, I need to find out everything about Stanislav. Who he is, what he does, where he spends his time. I need his weaknesses, his mistakes. You know how to dig up such information." Artyom paused for a moment, then nodded. "I have a couple of contacts who can check his business activities. If he slipped up anywhere, we'll find it." "And what will you do with it?" "For now, the plan is this. I want to take away everything that makes him so arrogant." Victor answered, "Then we'll see." Artyom nodded approvingly. He respected Victor's restraint, but knew that beneath that calm lay a storm ready to sweep everything away. "All right, old man," he said, "I'll take care of it. Give me a couple of days. I'll find everything I can about your opponent." "Thank you," Victor replied, squeezing his hand. "I knew I could count on you." After that meeting, Victor went to his next ally, Ekaterina Fyodorovna, a lawyer, and Artyom's cousin. Ekaterina was a person who knew how to work within the law, but also how to find loopholes. Her office was downtown, in a small but cozy law firm. She greeted Victor with a restrained smile. "Hello, Victor," she said, shaking his hand. "Artyom warned me you were coming. Sit down and tell me what happened." Victor told the story again from the beginning, showing the evidence he had gathered. Ekaterina listened carefully without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. "The situation is complicated," she said when he finished, "but I see several options. First, we can start the divorce process in a way that minimizes your losses and protects your property. Second, I can investigate Stanislav's affairs. If he has financial frauds or something similar, we'll uncover it." "It needs to be done quickly," Victor said. Ekaterina nodded. "I'll arrange everything, but remember, Victor," she added, looking him straight in the eyes, "revenge is a delicate tool. You have to use it carefully, otherwise it will turn against you." "I understand," he replied quietly, "but I can't leave things as they are." When Victor left the office, he felt the puzzle starting to come together. It was time to move forward. Nadezhda suspected nothing, continuing her life, thinking her secret was safe, but Victor knew time was on his side. He returned home late. In the evening, the aquarium in the corner gurgled as always, creating an illusion of familiar comfort. "This is only the beginning," he said softly, raising a glass of water in a silent toast. To himself, to the beginning. Victor Vasilyevich woke at dawn, staring at the ceiling where faint morning light filtered through the curtains. Sleep did not bring relief, on the contrary. He woke with even stronger determination. Today had to become the start of his new life. He needed to cut all ties that bound him to Nadezhda. The break had to be complete, ruthless, but coldly calculated. He got out of bed, dressed in his usual dark jeans and shirt, and went down to the kitchen. Nadezhda was already there, standing by the stove, humming a tune as she cooked. Her frivolous, content appearance only deepened Victor's pain, but again, he suppressed his emotions. "Good morning," she said over her shoulder without turning. "Morning," Victor replied shortly. He sat down at the table and slowly drank from his glass of water. Words he wanted to say to her raced through his mind, but each felt unnecessary now was not the time for confrontations or loud arguments. Instead, he decided to make the first step, distance himself without leaving her in the dark. He left for work the day dragged on in slow monotony, but by the end, he had submitted his resignation. For most colleagues, this was unexpected. He was respected for his professionalism, and many considered him indispensable. Quitting, his boss asked in surprise. "Yes, I need some time to rethink my priorities," Victor said calmly, "to step away from the routine that tied me to the past life." He no longer wanted to be part of the usual order that had formed around Nadezhda. Victor decided he deserved more. After work, he returned home to find Nadezhda in the living room, flipping through a magazine, clearly not expecting him so early. "You're home already?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, I had some things to take care of," he replied shortly, passing by. In his room, he closed the door, pulled out documents for the car, apartment, and bank accounts. Carefully checking everything, he transferred significant sums to a new account he had opened the day before. He re-registered the car in his name, removing her ability to make any claims. Victor knew that the legal foundation for his future actions had to be flawless. Late at night, he began packing his things, laptop, documents, books, and other small items. He decided to leave his things behind. They were just things and meant nothing to him when there was no love or trust beside him. The next day, when Nadezhda came home, Victor was sitting in the kitchen with a suitcase at his feet. "Are you leaving?" she asked, noticing the luggage. He looked her straight in the eyes, his voice cold and steady, but with something heavy beneath. "What's going on? Is this because of work?" She tried to grasp the most obvious reason. Victor smirked. Her attempt to avoid the real conversation only strengthened his resolve. "No, Nadia," he said, looking away, "it's because of us." She wanted to say something, but he raised his hand to stop her. "Accept it." He picked up the suitcase and walked past her, not even trying to notice the confusion on her face. At the door, he stopped, took a deep breath, and headed toward the taxi waiting outside. Victor went to a rented apartment that RDM had prepared for him in advance, small but cozy. It became his temporary refuge here. He could calmly work on his plan, from emails to accounts and social networks. He cut off Nadezhda's access to any financial resources that might ease her life. He was no longer going to support her. But the most important step was severing all emotional ties. No calls, no messages, no "how are you?" He became emptiness to her. But now, that was impossible. He no longer belonged to her world. Her distancing strategy and precise professional advice gave Victor confidence. "The divorce will be quick," Ekaterina said. Studying the documents, "You did the right thing by securing something significant." "Excellent," Victor replied. "The sooner it's over, the better." Despite his outward calm, emotions boiled inside Victor. He had to suppress the desire to take everything back, to fix the relationship, to forgive Nadezhda. But every time he remembered that photograph, her smile in the presence of a stranger, that desire disappeared. The break was inevitable, and Victor already felt freer with each passing day. Freer from pain, from doubts, from a past that no longer held power over him. Now all his focus was on the future, and he knew there was still much work ahead. A week had passed since Victor left the home that had recently seemed an impenetrable fortress. Now that place was just part of the past. During that time, his life had become cold, strict, and organized. Every step, every thought, every action had one goal: to restore justice. And that meant it was time to move on to the next stage. Stanislav, Nadezhda's lover, was not just a stranger. Victor had learned more about him than the man himself might have imagined thanks to Artyom's efforts. Victor now had a dossier revealing minute details of Stanislav's life, his finances, his tendency toward risky deals. But the most important information came from Ekaterina. Stanislav was married. His wife, Kristina Vladimirovna, owned the company of which he was the general director. Though he appeared to be a successful entrepreneur on paper, his position depended entirely on his wife's favor. He was not only a traitor, but a true parasite living off the trust of a woman who, like Victor, had no idea. And now Victor knew what to do next. Kristina Vladimirovna was a woman who combined strength and fragility, tall and slender. With a cold but beautiful gaze, she gave the impression of someone used to being in control, yet naively trusting those she loved. When Victor called her and requested a meeting, she hesitated for a long time, but his calm, confident tone and the words that he needed to talk about her husband did the trick. They met in a cozy cafe downtown. Kristina arrived in a strict business suit. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she carried a slim leather briefcase. Victor immediately realized he was facing a person who was used to keeping control of the situation. But he also saw something else in her eyes: fatigue, perhaps even a slight anxiety. "Good afternoon, Victor Vasilyevic," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was clear but tense. "I hope you will explain what all this means." "Thank you for making time," Victor replied as he sat down. "I understand how strange this must seem, but what I'm about to tell you will change your view of your husband." She pressed her lips, but said nothing, allowing him to continue. Victor slowly took out a photo from his folder, the very one he received in the traffic police letter. It showed Stanislav and Nadezhda. Kristina took the photo, her hands trembling slightly. "What is this?" she asked quietly, though the answer was already clear. "It's a photo taken by a traffic camera," Victor said calmly. "Your car is in the picture, and your husband is there with my wife." Her face turned pale. She stared at the photo for a long time, then set it aside, folding her hands on the table. "Why are you showing me this?" Her voice sharpened, becoming defensive. "Because, like me, you deserve to know the truth," Victor said, looking her straight in the eyes. "I know what it's like to be betrayed, and I don't want you to keep living a lie as I did." She closed her eyes and slowly inhaled when she looked back at him. Her gaze held more determination. "What do you want?" she asked. "Justice," Victor replied. "I'm not suggesting anything illegal, but if you want, we can join forces." "Join forces," she repeated. "What do you mean?" Victor pulled out another folder, this time with documents compiled by Katerina and Artyom, evidence of Stanislav's financial fraud, documents showing how he used company funds for personal needs. "This," Victor said, handing her the folder, "is what might be useful to you, everything he's been hiding." Kristina took the folder and began flipping through the pages. Her eyes quickly scanned the text, and as she read, her face grew darker. "He used company money to pay for you." She looked up at Victor, anger and more flashing in her eyes. "Calm down," Victor said. "There are also expensive trips, lavish restaurants, and purchases he hid from you." She slammed the folder shut sharply. Her hands trembling after several minutes of silence, she said, "All right, I agree, but what exactly do you propose?" Victor smiled, feeling he had found an ally. "We will dismantle his life piece by piece," he said. "As his wife and company owner, you have every right to demand answers. As for me, I just want to make sure he gets what he deserves." Kristina nodded. Her face hardened, but a spark of resolve appeared in her eyes. "Then we start," she said, "but I warn you, Victor Vasilyevic, I don't forgive betrayal from a wife or anyone else." "We share that," Victor said. Raising his coffee cup, they exchanged a brief look full of silent understanding. And so began their alliance, the alliance of the betrayed who decided never again to be victims. Now Victor had what he had been missing, an ally capable of helping him in his plan. With each step, he came closer to shattering Stanislav's world. While Victor and Kristina built their plans, Stanislav's life went on as usual. He lived in the firm belief that his position was unshakable. His wife owned the company, and he was the trusted general director. He indulged in the luxury his status provided: expensive suits, lavish trips, some hidden under the guise of business travel. Stanislav had no idea his double life was about to collapse. Victor and Kristina's first step was a thorough examination of the company's financial documents. Kristina gave Ekaterina full access to the company's accounting, and as an experienced lawyer, she quickly found holes. At first glance, the company's affairs looked perfect: regular tax reports, stable profits. But Ekaterina found several suspicious transfers Stanislav had recorded as business expenses. "Here they are," Ekaterina said, showing Victor and Kristina the report. These funds have nothing to do with your company. Christina, they went to accounts linked to private services, expensive restaurants, villa rentals. And here, she added, a necklace worth 300,000 rubles. Her hands trembled as she looked at the sums Stanislav had spent behind Christina's back. This is outrageous, she whispered, clenching the folder tightly. He was stealing from me, from our company, all for this woman. Victor nodded calmly. This is just the tip of the iceberg, he said, and we can go further if we present this evidence to the authorities. He could face criminal charges. Christina spoke softly, but this will destroy not only him, it could damage the company's reputation. That's true, Ekaterina interjected, but if we present the information properly, you can come out of this with minimal losses. After long discussions, a plan was developed. Christina agreed to the first step, a public exposure of Stanislav during the company's board meeting. This was meant to be not only a shock to Stanislav himself, but also the first step toward his downfall. The board meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. In a room painted in strict, gray tones, about 20 people gathered, top managers, lawyers, and representatives of major partners. Stanislav entered the hall with his usual confident smile, unaware that this day would become a turning point in his life. Christina took her place at the head of the table, looking impeccable in a sharp suit, her hair neatly tied back, her gaze cold. Victor, sitting nearby, watched her and couldn't help but admire her strength. Dear colleagues, Christina began, standing up, today's meeting will be devoted to discussing the financial operations conducted by our company over the last 3 years. Stanislav tensed slightly, but didn't lose his smile. Christina, this is important, but perhaps we can postpone this discussion, he suggested, trying to maintain unnecessary calm. No, Christina answered sharply. I believe everyone here needs to hear this. With those words, Christina handed the floor to Ekaterina, who, as an experienced lawyer, began presenting data confirming the embezzlement. The screen in the center of the room displayed every transaction, every fictitious contract Stanislav had used to conceal his fraud. At first, Stanislav maintained his composure, pretending it was just a misunderstanding and that all the transactions had explanations, but as Ekaterina presented more and more evidence, his face paled. That's a lie, he suddenly shouted. Rising from his seat, Christina, you know I always acted in the company's best interest. You acted, Christina interrupted coldly and clearly. Whose interests were served when you bought a necklace for 300,000 rubles or paid for a villa rental you used for your personal meetings? The room fell silent. All eyes were on Stanislav, who was now desperately trying to justify himself. That was all part of work, he shouted, desperately searching for an escape. Meetings, negotiations with clients, that's enough. Christina stood up, cutting him off firmly. You didn't just betray me. Stanislav, you betrayed our company. Our employees from this moment. You are relieved of your duties, and your actions will be investigated by the authorities. Her words sounded like a verdict. Stanislav slumped back into his chair as if his legs gave out. After the meeting, Christina, Victor, and Ekaterina left the room together. That was powerful, Victor said as they stepped away from the doors. Christina sighed, her face still serious. This is just the beginning, she said. That's right, his time is over. And that's what he deserves, Victor replied, looking at her with respect. They exchanged a brief glance full of silent understanding. This day was not only the end for Stanislav, but also the start of something new for both of them. With the first step taken, Victor felt their plan was moving in the right direction, but he knew much more awaited him ahead. Victor stood by the window of his new apartment. Sipping coffee outside stretched the usual cityscape. Small parks, parked cars, and nondescript apartment blocks. At another time, this view would have seemed dull, but now it brought a strange relief. Here everything was different. New walls, a new order, a new way of life, and most importantly, no more hope linked to Nadezhda. Since then, the entire process had become a kind of catharsis for him, a release from inner pain. Stanislav lost his job, and Christina filed for divorce, securing full legal advantage. But with that ended the first phase of Victor's plan. Now he stood at the threshold of a new chapter and pondered what his next step would be. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled him. Victor put down his cup and walked to the entrance. Opening the door, he saw Christina, tired but still composed and beautiful. "Good morning, Victor," she smiled. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Of course not," he replied, inviting her in. "What's going on?" he asked as she stepped inside and surveyed the minimalist room. Strict furniture lines, no unnecessary details. "It looks like something out of a magazine here," she noted. "I try," Victor smiled. "But you didn't come just to comment on the decor," Christina sighed, sitting down on the couch. "I actually wanted to talk to you about an idea." Victor sat opposite, watching her carefully. "You know, I moved out of the house," she began. "I can't live where everything reminds me of Stanislav anymore. I'm staying with my sister Liza now." "Yes, you mentioned her," Victor nodded. "I know their situation isn't easy. A small apartment, and now it's cramped with you there." Christina hesitated. "What is it?" Victor gently urged. Maybe we could rent a house together," she blurted out. Victor was surprised, but tried not to show it. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Christina nodded. "You help me now. I trust you. We both want to leave the past behind and start something new besides. Liza and her daughter are wonderful people. I think you'd like them." Victor thought for a few seconds. The idea was unexpected, but intriguing. He felt a new environment could save him from loneliness. "All right," he finally said, "let's try." A week later, they found a suitable house on the city outskirts. A spacious cottage with a large living room, bright bedrooms, and a cozy yard. Liza and her daughter Veronica moved in first. Christina and Victor finished the last preparations. On moving day, Veronica, a little girl with mischievous curls, immediately brought joy to the house. She ran through the rooms, peeked into closets, and asked Liza excitedly, tugging her hand, "Do you like it here?" "Yes, sweetie," Liza smiled. "It's very nice," Veronica exclaimed. Victor watched with a light smile. He hadn't felt such a warm atmosphere around for a long time. That first evening, the whole family gathered for dinner around the large wooden table, with dishes prepared by Christina and Liza. Later, Veronica fell asleep right on the couch, clutching a soft toy. When the house quieted down, Victor stayed in the kitchen with Liza, helping clear the dishes. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For giving us a chance at a normal life," she replied, looking at him. "Veronica is happy here, and I feel at peace too." Victor wanted to respond, but froze, meeting her sincere gaze. There was something warm and genuine in it, and he felt a thaw inside himself. "I'm glad you're here," he finally said. The following weeks passed in care and bustle. Victor grew closer to them all. Veronica constantly asked questions and made him engage with her playfully. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed so sincerely. Lisa, in turn, became a quiet support for Victor. They often talked in the evenings when Veronica was already asleep, discussing their lives and sharing their thoughts. Victor felt that something more than just friendship was developing between them. Christina, on the other hand, was fully focused on restoring her company. She often left for the office early and returned late, but she was always grateful for the calm atmosphere she now found at Victor's home. This new house became more than just a place to live. Victor felt that here, among these people, he finally found what he had been searching for so long: warmth, understanding, and love. And although the past was not forgotten, it no longer held him in its grip. Ahead was a new chapter, full of hope and possibilities. Several months had passed since Victor completely severed all ties with his past life, and the new home was filled with a warm and unexpected feeling of harmony. Victor got used to Veronica's laughter, the calm conversations with Lisa, and the quiet strength that Christina radiated. It was a place where he no longer had to feel alone. But one day, the past knocked on his door again. Victor was coming home late from work. He had taken a new position to fill his free time and distract himself from memories. He parked the car near the house, climbed the steps to the door, and inserted the key into the lock. But before he could turn the handle, he heard a voice behind him, one he never expected to hear again. "Victor!" He froze. His heart stopped for a moment, and then began to beat faster. Turning around, he saw a figure wrapped in a coat, shoulders slumped, and a familiar yet completely changed look in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. She stepped closer. The face that once seemed confident and self-satisfied now looked tired and worn out, her eyes swollen, as if she had been crying for a long time. "I need to talk," she said, looking at him pleadingly. "Please." "What about?" he asked quietly. She looked down, her hands trembling as she clasped them together, as if trying to find support. "I know what I did was terrible," she began, "and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I can't go on like this anymore. I need to say this." Victor sighed, then opened the door and motioned for her to come inside. The house was quiet. Lisa was putting Veronica to bed, and Christina was still at the office. They went to the living room, and Victor turned on the table lamp. The soft light illuminated Nadia's face, making her look even more worn out. "Speak briefly," he said, sitting across from her. She slumped onto a chair, as if those words had drained the last of her strength. She was silent for several seconds, then looked up. "I destroyed everything," she said, "everything we had, and I realize it only now, when nothing can be undone." "That's right," Victor answered dryly. Her lips trembled. She clenched her hands into fists, as if trying not to cry. "You were the best thing I ever had, Victor," she whispered. "You always care for me, put me first, and I threw it all away for nothing for Stanislav." He corrected her, his voice striking like a blow. "He means nothing to me now." She flinched as if slapped. "After you left, everything went wrong. He just disappeared when I could no longer give him anything, and I was left alone." Victor was silent. He looked at her, feeling two conflicting emotions battling inside his chest: cold satisfaction and deep fatigue. "Did you come here for pity at last?" he asked. "Or do you think I could take you back into my life?" "No," she exclaimed, throwing her hands up. "I'm not asking for that. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know that I understand the pain I caused you." She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. Victor realized she was crying real, sincere tears. He didn't know whether to feel glad or pity. "Nadia," he finally said, "I forgive you." She raised her head. Hope flickered in her eyes. "Really?" "Yes," he nodded, "but that doesn't mean I want you back. Forgiveness isn't a return. It's just a way to leave the past behind." Her face paled, but she nodded, accepting his words. "I understand," she whispered. "Thank you for at least listening." She stood, preparing to leave. "Are you doing okay now?" she asked without looking at him. "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "Very well." Nadia nodded, turned, and slowly walked to the door. Victor watched her go, but didn't get up to say goodbye. He heard the front door slam and understood he would never see her again. Later that evening, Victor sat in the kitchen, thoughtfully twisting a cup of cold tea in his hands. Lisa quietly entered the room and sat opposite him. "Are you okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Just a strange evening." She placed her hand on his. "Sometimes the past returns to remind us how far we've come," she said. Victor smiled. Her words were exactly what he needed to hear. "Thank you, Lisa," he said quietly, grateful for the support of friends. She seemed like she wanted to say more, but instead, she simply smiled and stood up to leave. When Victor was left alone, he felt a deep calm finally settle inside him. Nadia had left not only his home, but also his heart. Ahead of him was a new life, one he could now build from a clean slate. Days passed, as if a heavy burden had been lifted now. His time was filled with caring for the house, work, and unexpectedly, warm moments with Lisa and little Veronica. He never would have thought he'd find comfort and joy in such a new and seemingly temporary situation. But what began as a practical solution gradually grew into something much more. Saturday morning greeted them with bright sunshine, illuminating the house, and Veronica woke up first, as usual, and burst into Victor's bedroom with loud laughter. "Victor, get up," she shouted, climbing onto his bed. "We're going for a walk." He groaned, pretending to still be asleep, but Veronica wouldn't give up. She tugged at him and made fierce but funny faces. All right, I give up," he finally said, stretching. "I'm getting up now." "Hooray!" the little girl exclaimed and ran downstairs from the bed. When he came down to the kitchen, Lisa was already making breakfast. She stood by the stove in a simple house dress, her hair tied back in a ponytail. Victor paused for a moment. Looking at her, he realized he'd been noticing her beauty, her calmness, and warmth more and more lately. "Good morning," she said, turning around and smiling. "Good morning," he replied, sitting down at the table. "Veronica gave me an early wake-up call," Lisa said, setting a cup of coffee in front of him. "She adores you. It's obvious." "And I adore her," Victor answered sincerely. And it was true. Veronica filled the house with laughter and light that had been missing from his life for so long. After breakfast, the whole group went to the park. Victor and Lisa walked side by side, while Veronica ran around collecting leaves and twigs, her laughter ringing in the air like music. Suddenly Lisa said, "You think so?" looking at Victor. "Think what?" he asked, slightly embarrassed. "I see it every day," she replied. "And not just in her, you've become part of our lives." He looked at her, and their eyes met. In that look, there was something new, something that made his heart beat faster. That same evening, it was just the two of them. Christina was again late at the office, and Veronica had fallen asleep. Lisa sat on the couch in the living room, flipping through a book when Victor came in with 2 cups of tea. "For you," he said, placing 1 cup in front of her. "Thank you," she smiled, looking up from the book. He sat nearby, some distance between them, but soon felt a warm silence settle between them. It was an unusual feeling, but not unwelcome. "You know," he started, "I wanted to thank you for everything, for you and Veronica coming into my life." She smiled, but then her eyes suddenly grew serious. "You know, Victor," she said quietly, "I think it's we who should be thanking you. You gave us something we hadn't had for a long time, a feeling of safety." His heart tightened at her words. He wanted to reply, but the words got stuck in his throat instead. He simply reached out and gently touched her hand. Lisa didn't pull away, and for a moment time seemed to stop. "Victor," she began but stopped. He leaned closer, their faces just inches apart. It was a moment that could not be ignored. Victor saw in her eyes the same feelings he had: desire, caution, hope. "Can I?" he asked softly. Lisa said nothing but nodded, and in the next moment, their lips met. It was a gentle kiss, but it held so much warmth that Victor felt something inside him finally begin to heal. When they pulled away, Lisa smiled, slightly embarrassed but happy. "That was unexpected," she said. "I could say the same," he replied with a smile. Since then, everything had changed between them. Something new had grown. Fragile, but real. They tried not to rush it, but it was more than just friendship. Lisa became not only a support for Victor, but also a source of light. He had been missing so much, and Victor became the man beside whom Lisa felt truly happy. None of this went unnoticed. One evening, Christina said to Victor, "I see that you found what you were searching for so long." He looked at her in surprise, but she only smiled. "You and Lisa, it's right." Her words made him realize that he was no longer afraid of the past. Now before him lay a new life, one with room for love, warmth, and true happiness. And although many challenges still awaited them, Victor felt that with Lisa, he could face anything. Another spring passed, and Victor's life with Lisa had turned into a strong, harmonious union. Their feelings had long since outgrown shy attraction. Between them reigned that rare closeness that could not be called accidental. Victor felt happy. He was ready for the next step. Christina, who often watched their relationship, joked, "You and Lisa have been like a family for a long time. Why not make it official?" Victor often replayed those words in his mind, but he wanted to wait for the right moment. That moment came at the beginning of summer when Lisa, and Veronica went on a picnic by the river. The warm evening, the gentle murmur of the water, and the quiet laughter of the girl playing nearby created a perfect atmosphere. Victor took a small box out of his pocket, and kneeling down on one knee in front of Lisa, he took her hand. "Lisa," he began, feeling his voice slightly tremble, "I thought I could never love again, but you show me that life can be different. You've given me happiness and warmth, and I want you to be by my side forever. Will you marry me?" Lisa covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. She nodded and then hugged Victor tightly, whispering, "Yes, of course, yes." Noticing this, Veronica ran up to them and clapped her hands. Mom, I'm going to marry Victor now? Yes, sweetheart. Lisa smiled, stroking her hair. Hooray, the girl shouted. Now I'll have the best dad ever. Veronique's words filled Victor's heart with warmth. He hugged Lisa and the girl tightly, realizing that from now on, he truly had a family. That same day, Christina received a call from Victor with the news. She laughed when she heard that Lisa had said yes. Well, it's said and done. She joked, congratulations, thank you for everything. Victor replied, without you, I wouldn't have made it this far. Now it's your turn to support me. Christina added with a mysterious tone in her voice. What do you mean? You'll see, she said and hung up. A few days later, everything became clear. Christina also announced her plans. She and Artyom, the owner of a motel and an old friend of Victor's, had been close for a long time, and their relationship had turned into something more. I thought after the divorce, I wouldn't let anyone else into my life, Christina confessed to Victor, but Artyom was the one who taught me to believe again. Victor was sincerely happy for her. He knew how hard it had been for Christina to overcome Stanislav's betrayal and saw how she gradually grew stronger because of it. And so, two unions appeared on the horizon at once. We have a shared history, Christina said. Why not start a new chapter together? Lisa supported the idea. Victor was surprised at first, but eventually agreed. The wedding day arrived on a hot August morning. The celebration took place in a beautiful garden outside the city, decorated with white and pastel flowers. Guests arrived early, filling the space with joy and excitement. Lisa looked stunning in a delicate lace dress, her hair styled simply but elegantly. As she walked down the aisle with Veronica, Victor felt tears welling up in his eyes. You're beautiful, he whispered when she stood next to him. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Looking into Lisa's eyes, Victor said his vows. I promise to always love you, to be by your side, to protect and care for you. You are my family, and I will do everything to keep you happy. Lisa smiled, tears sparkling in her eyes. And I promise to always be your support, your friend, and your love. We are together, Victor, now and forever. They exchanged rings, and at that moment, Veronica shouted, Kiss her. The guests laughed, and Victor leaned down to kiss Lisa gently. After the ceremony, Christina arrived, elegant and radiant, her smile full of happiness. Artyom looked unusually dressed up, but his eyes showed sincere admiration. Christina, he said, holding her hands, you changed my life. You showed me that love exists even after you stop believing in it. Thank you for being you. The applause was loud and warm. Now, at the wedding, they were celebrating not one, but two unions, and the atmosphere was full of joy. That evening, after the guests had left, Victor, Lisa, Veronica, Christina, and Artyom remained alone in the garden. They sat at the same table, sipping champagne and gazing at the stars. You know, Artyom said, raising his glass, we've all been through hard times, but today I see that it was all worth it. We found each other, and that's what matters most. Everyone raised their glasses. Victor looked at Lisa and Veronica, his heart filled with gratitude. Now he knew that despite all the difficulties, his life had finally found meaning. The future seemed bright. 6 months passed since the day Victor and Lisa exchanged their vows under the clear summer sky. Life had gradually settled into its usual rhythm. But there was so much warmth, joy, and harmony that Victor often caught himself thinking about how much everything had changed. The house that once seemed like a temporary refuge had become a true home. Everyone had their role, and everything rested on an amazing balance. Veronica grew up lively and curious. She didn't just accept Victor as a father. She adored him. Their bond grew stronger every day now. They built houses from blocks together, painted and read bedtime stories, and every dad, she called him, Victor heard the love and sincerity he had longed for all those years. Christina and Artyom were also thriving. Their marriage flourished, and whenever they all gathered, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and jokes. Christina often shared her plans with Lisa and Victor for developing her company, which had only grown stronger after Stanislav's departure. But the past still reminded them of itself. After Stanislav's arrest for financial fraud, Victor didn't get involved in the details of the case. Trusting Christina and her lawyers Ekaterina, their mutual ally, made sure he couldn't escape responsibility. One winter evening, Victor received a call from Christina. Her voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. "It's over," she said. Stanislav pleaded guilty. Christina sighed. Now this chapter is closed. Victor was silent, expecting this moment, but hearing those words brought him a strange relief. "You made it through," Victor finally said, "and you deserve to live free of that burden." "Thank you, Victor," she replied, "but you know what? You made it too. You left all of that behind." After the call, Victor sat quietly by the window, watching the snow outside. He thought about how far he had come since the day he received that letter of happiness. When his world fell apart now, he was stronger. That evening, Victor decided to talk with Lisa. She was sitting on the couch reading a book, but seeing his thoughtful expression, she put it aside. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No," he answered, sitting down next to her. "I'm just thinking about how much my life has changed and how grateful I am for you and Veronica." Lisa smiled, slightly blushing. "And we're grateful for you. Victor, you made our lives better." He pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her body seep into every cell of his soul. "I think now we can truly be happy," he said softly, "and we will be." Spring brought new hopes and dreams. Victor and Lisa's home became livelier. Veronica was now preparing for first grade. She enthusiastically talked about school, how she would make new friends, and one day asked Victor, "Will you help me with my homework?" "Of course," he replied with a smile. Their home was often filled with guests. Friends and family invited Victor and Lisa for weekend dinners. These gatherings became a tradition, a time when everyone could share their successes and just relax among loved ones. At one such dinner, Christina said, "I think all our trials were meant for us to find each other." "You're right," Lisa added, looking at Victor with love. "It's worth living, and most importantly, we're not alone." One evening, alone in his study, Victor took out an old folder filled with documents. All the evidence against Stanislav. Photos, letters, things that once caused him so much pain. He slowly flipped through them, remembering those days when his life was filled with betrayal and despair. But now, it didn't hurt anymore. Instead, he felt pride in how he had overcome it all. Victor took the folder to the fireplace and threw it into the flames. The fire quickly consumed the papers, leaving only the faint smell of burning. When everything had burned, Victor felt truly free for the first time. He returned to the living room where Lisa and Veronica waited for him. Wrapped in a blanket, the little girl had already fallen asleep. "Are you ready for bed?" Victor asked gently, sitting down beside them. He hugged them, both watching the fire in the fireplace. He knew his life was no longer burdened by the past. It belonged to the present, full of love and light. And this was the happiest moment of his life.